there's another one. Hey you guys, welcome back to my channel. Welcome back to another full month of nothing new video. I am so excited about today's video because we are going to be ranking my very favorite eyeshadow brand, Juvia's Place. When I started this month and I knew I wanted to do some ranking videos, this is the video I saved to the end because I have a very strong attachment to all of my Juvia's Place palettes. Juvia's Place, in my mind, represents everything that is good and fun about eyeshadow palettes. And I do have 10 of their palettes, so we're going to be ranking them today in order from my least favorite and least used to my most favorite and most used. So I hope you guys are excited about this one. Before we jump into it, special welcome to any of you that are new to my channel. Hopefully you'll stick around, and if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and now let the ranking begin. Before we get into the ranking, I wanted to mention one thing. So I did just post a video very recently on my 5 very favorite eyeshadow formula brands, and I did not include Juvia's Place in that video. I was so close to including them. They were right up there at the top, but while I do love the Juvia's Place formula, that is not what I love the very most about their palettes. The number one reason I love Juvia's Place so much is for their color stories. I think that they come up with the funnest, most creative, and very unique color stories as a whole. Every single one of their palettes, and I am looking at them in front of me now, have several shades inside of them that are so unique, but are also not out of my personal comfort zone. And I do like to play with color, but I don't like to play with very bright, bold rainbow color. So I just wanted to get that out of the way really briefly. I know there were a lot of questions in that video on why I didn't put Juvia's Place in that video. I do think Juvia's Place has a really good formula, but for their colors, and also their packaging. I really love their packaging. They are my number one brand. Enough rambling. Let's jump into my bottom ranked palette. So coming in at number 10, I'm going to go with the WAHALA palette. This is their newest palette that I personally own. It is very, very colorful. I did just talk about this in my ranking all the palettes that I've tried out in the year 2020, and I put this one not all the way at the bottom, but it was a little bit lower in my ranking list, simply for 2 reasons. There's quite a few pressed glitters in here that I don't think I will ever get any use out of, other than occasionally when Charlie's in here sitting on my lap as I go through my makeup or plan out videos. I do like to pull out this palette sometimes because she loves these very bold glitters. They're very fun to swatch on her hand, but I certainly don't have any intentions of wearing them on my eyes just because that's not really my makeup style. But if you are into color, more specifically a variety of colors and finishes, I think this would be an amazing palette for you. I do like this palette. I will use it occasionally. There are quite a few shades in here that I think are unique and that I do really enjoy. But as a whole, and for the lack of neutrals in here, I just know this is one that I don't use a lot and I probably won't use as much as my others. Ranked at number 9, I'm going to go with the Warrior 2 palette. I do want to put an asterisk next to my comments on ranking this palette at number 9. I have only used this palette twice. One of those times being for this eye look today. I don't know why this palette, which I bought, I think at the very beginning of the year, I want to say around January, I was excited about this all matte palette. I had intended to use it and somehow it just got lost in the shuffle. So the main reason I am ranking at number 9 is simply for the fact that I've only used this twice. However, I did use it today, as I mentioned in this eye look, along with another palette that I'll talk about in a minute here. Specifically, I used this peach shade in my crease, and then I also used a combination of these 2 dark browns. This is kind of like a charcoal brown in my outer corner to smoke things out and kind of as a liner right there. And it was pretty amazing, guys. I really think this is one that could move up the lineup in the future as I give it a little bit more use. And that sometimes does happen to me with all matte palettes because I always want a shimmer on my lid. It's easier for me just to reach for a palette that has both mattes and shimmers. But that said, there are some stellar matte shades inside here. And if you are a matte fan and you like some richness and subtle color, this is a really nice all matte color story. I've been impressed with the formulas that I have tried out so far. Using it today got me excited to get some more use out of this. So it might be coming in at number 9 today, but watch out for this one because I have a feeling this one might move up the rankings a bit. For the palette I've ranked at number 8, I'm going to go with the Tribe palette. This is another palette that I feel like might have a chance of moving up the rankings because I think this is a really fun and interesting palette and color story. There are some good neutrals inside here that I know I'll use for an everyday type of look, but it gives you a couple of colors in here for those times when you want to kind of push the limits. I did do a video where I used this palette for a kind of more creative look with a lime green inner corner shade. I thought that was such a fun look. Not one that I would wear on a daily basis, but when maybe you have a day off and you just want to sit down and play with your makeup, this is the type of palette I think is perfect for that. But for those days when you don't want to go for something bold, really when you take out those two lime greens, this is a beautiful everyday neutral palette with just a bit of a twist. A very fun one. Maybe one of my most favorite packages from them because I just love the lime green. It is another one that is a little bit newer to me. I picked this one up at the beginning of the year. I think I got this in the same order that I picked up the Warrior 2 palette. I have used this one a few more times, but I still haven't used it a ton, which is really the biggest reason that I'm putting it down at number 8. Coming in at number 7, I'm going to go with the original Saharan palette. I think this is such a beautiful palette. This is one of the palettes that I featured in my palette redesign video that I did in collaboration with Andrea Montiliano and Jen Phelps. I mentioned in that video the biggest reason I don't reach for this palette more than I think I should is because it includes a matte black, and I just don't use matte black very often. And for me, I always prefer a deep brown. The biggest reason for that is just my personal preference. I have harsher features. I am a little bit older, which certainly doesn't help with the harsher features. So I find when I use black, either liner or shadow, too much on my eyes, it just looks a little bit too stark on me. A lot of people mention it, and I absolutely can understand this, that for those with much deeper skin tones, a black would probably work much better on you. But because I prefer a rich chocolatey brown to add depth to my looks, I just don't reach for this palette as much as I think I otherwise would. I do love the color story of this one. It is one of my favorite palettes to pull out in the fall. There's just so much fun variety in here and really beautiful fall tones. I love the packaging of this one. The combination of the coral with the mint green inside is just such a fun color combination. I mean, just seeing this sitting on my desk before I even touch the eyeshadows brings me a lot of joy. But I still feel like, especially compared to some of their other palettes, I don't use this one quite as much as I think I probably should. Ranked at number 6, I'm going to go with the Nubian 3 Coral palette. This palette I picked up at the beginning of the year along with the other couple palettes I mentioned. And when this palette was first released, which I believe was the beginning of last year, so I think a little bit over a year ago, I wasn't initially all that interested in this color story. Something about seeing this palette online, seeing the grays in there, and the softer pinks and the chocolatey browns and just the handful of coral shades had me a little bit confused on why this was called a coral palette. I really think I just got kind of hung up on the name. Now that I have the palette and when I step back and just look at the colors inside here, guys, this is a really, really beautiful one. If you like peachy kind of corals, subtle pinks, and occasionally a splash of gray, this is a really fun palette to play with. For the first 5 or 6 months that I had this, I really did not reach into these grays at all because I just wasn't quite sure how these fit in with the rest of the palette, but I've been getting a little bit more into gray eyeshadow lately, and these are really beautiful ones. But I would say even if you're not into gray eyeshadow, these shades here are so, so pretty. They're very, very soft and rich at the same time. I love the looks that I can crank out with this palette. I love the lid shades inside here. You get a couple of different interesting transition shades and some beautiful deeper shades for the outer corner, that beautiful rich matte brown, which I absolutely love. This is one of their palettes that I don't think that you need to be quite as creative when you dip into this palette. You can just throw something lighter into your transition area, anything darker into your outer corner, and one of the lighter shimmers on your lid, or even the deeper shimmers on your lid if you want something more smoky, and you'll get a really beautiful look without a lot of thought or effort. And while initially I didn't quite understand why they threw those grays in there, I now admit that's one of the things that I do love about Juvia's place. They always throw something in their palettes that is going to stretch you a little bit if you're afraid of doing something different. And I love the way this palette does that. And it has those peachy kind of pink shades that I just think look so pretty on anyone. Coming in the number 5 spot, I'm going with the Douce palette. This is such a good palette. I almost feel bad putting it halfway down on the list. I feel like this palette is better and more deserving than just a number 5 spot, but they have so many other great palettes that I'll be talking about in a minute. So don't mistake the number 5 ranking as me not loving this palette. This is such a great palette and one of my favorite palettes to pull out in the springtime. This deep, very chocolatey, almost charcoal brown is everything that I love in an outer corner shade. I would not be upset if every single palette that I owned in my entire collection included this very exact dark chocolatey brown shade because I just think it's such a great one and it is so creamy and blendable, even more so than some of their other rich chocolatey browns or deep kind of charcoaly brown colors. Most people would look at this palette and think, whoa, that might be a little bold for me, especially when your eyes are drawn to this middle magenta shade and this mint green. But you guys, these are not as intimidating as they appear to be. You can really sheer this shade out and this is such a beautiful shade on the lid. And other than those two shades, I feel like everything else in here is very soft and very neutral. Even this gray, which looks like a medium silvery gray, is very, very light and brightening on the lid. So it's a really beautiful one. Let's just swatch a couple of them. I mean, look at that brown, you guys. This shade right here, which is kind of like a white with a purpley lavender pink shift. Love this peach in my transition area. This kind of, I love this shade right here. It's like a terracotta rose. Oh, look at those, you guys. Those are so stunning. And this green right here is such a fun color. I mean, seriously, guys, this is just a really fun palette. Love the packaging of this one. Love the white with the soft peachy pink. It's absolutely amazing. One of my favorites, even though it's ranked at number 5. Coming in at number 5, I'm going to go with the Saharan 2 palette. This is another palette from them that I think is a little bit underrated. I don't hear a lot of people talking about this palette very much or using it very much, certainly not here on YouTube. But guys, this is such a beautiful palette. This is the palette that I'm wearing in combination with the Warrior 2 palette. I have this kind of bronzy peach on the outer part of my lid, and then I have this lighter toned peach on the inner part of my lid. Look at that shade, you guys. Oh, it's so pretty. Very reflective, but also not overly reflective. I don't know if you can see that. It's a little bit more almost satiny looking. It's such a pretty one. And then I have just a tiny bit of this duochrome gold on my inner corner. And man, guys, I am such a fan of this eye look today. I think it is so stunning. This is another one of those palettes that every time I play with this palette, not only am I so happy with the results of my eye look, but I have so much fun with it. It's just a really fun, creative palette that doesn't push me too far outside of my comfort zone. I have not yet used this shade right here. I mean, this is a shade that I don't use very often. I haven't quite figured out how to get a shade like this to work for me, and I do own variations of this shade throughout my collection, that kind of aqua teal green that I think is so pretty to swatch, but I don't really like how it looks on my lower lash line. It's a little bit too bold to put on my lid, but that's such a shame because it's such a beautiful shade. But this mint color, guys, I will wear this mint color, and it is absolutely beautiful. I want to swatch this one in comparison to the mint in the Douce palette, show you guys the difference between the two. So here's the one in the Douce palette. It's kind of a classic true mint, whereas this one from the Saharan 2 is a mint with a golden duochrome to it. It's so pretty, and the fact that it has that kind of golden shift makes it pair really well with some of the browns inside here, some of these peach colors. Looking at this color story, you might think, do those colors even really go together? But as you kind of pair things off, you can create so many different looks with this one. There is one shade in here that I am a little bit leery of or careful with, and it's this center shade, which is the shade Zora. It's a really pretty velvety red, but this is one that I find when I start to really blend this through my crease, it can turn quite pink. So you want to use a really light hand with this one. Don't over blend it unless you really want to go for that very pink magenta color, which I know some people will love that, but I'm just not a big fan of like a bright pink on my lids. But when used in moderation with this brown next to it, you get this beautiful like chocolate raspberry look in your outer corner that I just think is stunning. Let's just swatch a few of these. So I want to swatch these two browns in the corner. Look how pretty those are. Oh, very beautiful. I already swatched the tills for you guys, so let's swatch these kind of peach colors and that kind of bronzy red in the middle. So there they are right there. Look how pretty those are. Oh my goodness. And then here's that gold color. Oh man, isn't that so pretty? Such a fun palette. So underrated in my opinion. I love that it includes this kind of detailing inside here that's a little bit different than some of their other palettes. Just all around a great palette, which is why it's coming in at number 4. Down to my top 3, and I have long said that these are my top 3. Their positioning sometimes changes within the top 3 depending on kind of my mood and what kind of looks I am into at the time. But I'm not sure that anything could ever kick any of these palettes out of their top 3 spot. Let's start off with what I'm including in my number 3 spot, and it is the Magic Mini palette. Now this is one that I sometimes will again shuffle around depending on what my mood is. The reason I'm putting this in the number 3 spot is there are, in my opinion, a few shades inside here that I personally would love to have to get a more complete look out of just this palette. I'd love a champagne or a light gold or something, and I also would love a chocolatey brown. However, I'm not sure I would want to kick any of these shades out to get those replacements in here because I just love every shade individually inside here so much. This is one of those palettes that I love pairing with something else, like a basic neutral palette that does give me a matte brown, that does give me a light gold or champagne shimmer. When I'm really in the mood to play with color, or when someone comes to me and asks me for a good recommendation for a colorful palette that's not too rainbow, this is the one I will go with. Now you might look at this and think that is totally a rainbow palette, but I'm promising you guys, most of these colors are not as bold as a lot of the rainbow palettes that are out there. They're a little bit more subdued, and depending on how you use them, you can create some pretty neutral, colorful looks with this palette. It all depends on how you use the colors inside here, but if you use them with a soft hand or in combination with some neutrals, you can get some really soft, colorful looks with this. And beautiful, soft, colorful looks at that. There's just so many fun shades inside here. This purple is one of my very favorites in my collection. When I'm in the mood for something purple, you get a beautiful basic bronze in here. I love this kind of teal green color. Now this one is a little bit lighter than some of the other teals I mentioned I don't like to wear quite as much. So I can actually wear this teal on my lid and I don't think it looks too out out of my comfort zone because it's not too dark or too bold. I also love these soft pinks. I mean, as I'm swatching this, hopefully you guys can see. I mean, you look at this and think that's a very bright, colorful palette, but you look at my fingers and you think pastels, soft color. And that is what I love so much about this palette. It's a colorful, fun palette that's not over the top. Ranked at number 2, I'm going to go with the Nubian 2 palette. This was my first ever Juvia's Place palette. This is the palette that started my obsession, the palette that I first fell in love with, and for very good reason. This is the palette I would most recommend for those that want to stick more to the neutrals than to the colorfuls. Now I know it includes this green and this bold blue inside here, but other than those 2 shades, everything else in here is very, very neutral. It's a very good basic palette. You get a perfect champagne in here, you get a coppery bronze, a cooler tone bronze, and then 2 variations on like a yellowy orangey gold, which are so, so pretty, especially if you have deep skin or blue eyes. I would say those colors would look so amazing on. You also get some really good rich shades. I love this kind of reddish chocolate cherry color. It is so, so pretty. This purple, which is more of a satin in texture, but also works really good in the outer corner, is a beautiful shade to deepen things up or if you want something to kind of line with. And another great rich chocolatey brown. Great palette for staple looks, and we better go ahead and just swatch these colorful shades. For those that do love a little bit of color, these are really, really pretty ones. And this one will always hold a special place in my heart because it was the first one, and also it's just good. It's all around a really good basic palette. That leaves us with my number 1 palette. I would love to know how many of you, which have been watching me for a while, got this one right. I've got to go with the NOMAD palette. The biggest reason this palette is going at the number 1 spot is this color story is just such a me color story. I love really interesting kind of khaki green shades and yellows. I love a good basic orange. I love this rich chocolatey brown, of course. And have I told you guys how amazing this shade in the middle is? Yes, many times. This is such, oh, look at that. Every time I swatch this, and I've swatched it a lot, I've worn it a lot. I mean, this is one of my most reached for shades in my collection. Whoops, old swatches on my hand there. Have a look at this perfect champagne gold. Oh, good heavens. Is that not beautiful? Yes, it is. You cannot deny. It's absolutely stunning, and it goes with everything else inside this palette. There are so many fun looks that you can create with this one. I did do a video where I did, was it 3 or 4 looks with this palette, and I had so much fun creating those looks. This is, again, one of those palettes I love reaching for in the fall, but I certainly don't only reach for this palette in the fall. It can be a fun spring or summer palette, but these deep greens can be perfect for the fall or the winter. This shade right here, this kind of pukey green, just has me confused in the very best way. It's like, is it a brown? Is it a green? I can't really tell, and even on the eyes I feel that way about it, which is what I love so much about it. It's just very unique. And then look at that army green right there. Oh, good heavens. And then this kind of satiny charcoal that has a little bit of bronze in it. Let's just swatch 2 more. I mean, aren't those just so fun and unique? I just can't get over how fun of a palette this is. It's one of my very favorites. I don't know what makes me more excited about fall. The weather cooling down so I can wear boots and sweaters, or another opportunity to pull out this palette. I love this palette for the fall. Like, I get excited for fall so that I can use this palette. I know I can use it anytime, but specifically like these shades right here, they just make me crave fall, or fall makes me crave this palette. Either way you put it, this is just such a good palette from them. I know a lot of you guys have bought this palette on my recommendation because I have raved about it so emphatically for so long, but I just can't get enough of it, which is why it's coming in at number 1. It's one of the funnest, most inspiring palettes in my collection. Now, if you are not into khaki greens and you're not into yellows or oranges, you definitely will not like this palette because you get a lot of those inside here. But if those are colors that interest you, trust me, you guys, this is such a fun palette. I just love it with all my heart. And that, you guys, is it for all of my Juvia's Place palettes ranked. I feel pretty good about where everything ended up. I'd love now to hear from you guys. Have you tried out Juvia's Place? What is your favorite palette from them? Were you surprised with where any of these palettes ended up? Sound off in the comments down below. But I hope you guys had fun with this one. Thank you so much for watching today. I hope that you guys are all doing well. A couple more videos to go in this full month of nothing new, so be sure to subscribe if you haven't done that yet. And I will see you guys very soon in my next one. Bye. Had to trick you guys with the order. Now I've got to reshuffle these and hopefully I don't screw it up. This goes here. And you guys thought I was giving it all away. Well, now we're at the end of the video. There we go. Why in the world does the Nubian 2 and the WAHALA not have the name on the back? Kind of ruins the effect of the whole like storybook lineup. But that's okay, Juvia's Place. I still love you. And the simple fact of the matter is I just own too many. How many of you can relate to that?
My milk jug like on the top of the sink, is that like, can I use that for
water? I was gonna water my plants with it, but rinse it out, you can use it, yeah. Did you cook that chicken yet? Are you going to?
No.
You don't have time?
No.
Charlie, what are you doing?
Where's my uniform? No, not Zoom this. Not the blue one, the blue one and the white one.
Oh, you took it upstairs. Charlie, let me finish. Then go to Angie's. Go get your shoes on. They're in on the rug. In New Year, precis era bestämma svalliga precis då era med alla fjäser innan det vinner alla stilar räcka. Ni är det ser nog på det sättet det är så mer av en det så ifn. Hims där så ni gick men extra här det shit.